as Josh said, I'm Kate Garmey. I'm the Director of Marketing for TableXI. And over the years, I've had a lot of opportunities to explore and execute some really terrible ideas. But I am not here with a parole officer, so they're not that terrible. But I think if I was, it would make this presentation, as Josh says, a lot easier, because I'd have one story. I think it's because I think about my life a lot like a lab. I just test ideas, and I tinker, and I play around until I find something that I think is going to work. But often what I think is going to happen and what actually happens are just totally different things. And I started thinking about it, and I thought, well, maybe we should go back to the beginning. I think there's two types of mistakes that people make, often a failure to try or trying and failing. And I try a lot of things, and I fail a lot. But when I do it with gusto. So I don't make a lot of type 1 errors, you might say, but I make a ton of type 2 errors. And I actually took that scientific lens and I mapped them on a very scientific map, and I have this. My very scientific analysis of some of my favorite mistakes mapped against risk and optimism. You'll see they range from a scale of Wonder Woman to international disaster, obviously. And we'll talk about those in just a second. But I think to understand, you have to really go back to the beginning. This is me as Super Grover. As a kid, I was very obsessed with superheroes, and I had this idea that I was capable of just massive feats of physical prowess. I thought I could do anything, and I think that a lot of kids have that mentality, and it winds up in two things, like you either rescue mankind or get a ton of stitches. And I'm in the latter camp. Eventually, Wonder Woman evolved into Blind Wonder Woman, where I'd climb up the tallest thing I could find and just jump off of it with my eyes closed, which is sounds like such a good idea. But when you do it, you land on a baseboard heater. In college, I pushed that idea even further, and I was like, oh, Boston Marathon, I'm in. I didn't train for it. I just jumped in. And then I thought, you know what I should do before this is go to AC/DC, because AC/DC is just like carbo loading. But it's not, and I got really sick. And then later, I traveled and I started to test these hypotheses overseas. I did a bunch of traveling, and I was in Thailand, and I'd seen Broke Down Palace, and so I had this idea that all prisoners are just Claridanes who are just totally misunderstood and trapped and probably need friends. So I decided to go out and make a pen pal. I took a local bus all the way out into the suburbs of Bangkok, where I brought a book and a watermelon to go meet a Westerner that I just found off of the list. And I gave him my book, and inside I'd written my name and my email address and my parents' mailing address in case he ever wanted to write or visit. And I never heard from him. So in grad school, fast forward, I got interested in the idea of turning these ideas into ways I could make money, and I got interested in entrepreneurship, and I went and I saw a bunch of guys at Kellogg who couldn't get dates for Valentine's Day, and I'm like, I'm from Maine. I can fix this problem. I know lobstermen. So I decided to do a little thing I call Lobsters for Lovers. I sent an email out to the entire law school, business school, and journalism school with this great poem. Violets are blue, lobsters are too, but lobsters turn red when you cook them, and they taste better too. Buy 2 twin lobsters from me for Valentine's Day. And I got so many orders. I made 350 orders overnight. And then the one thing I didn't realize is that I was going to get 700 lobsters delivered to me live, crawling around. And while Kellogg embraces entrepreneurship, they're not so cool about transacting crustaceans on their premises. So they were in the trunk of my car. And I was trying to give them out in a snowstorm. But eventually what happened was I wound up, with a little bit of jazz hands, I wound up at TableXI, which is a place that embraces problem solving and thinking through ideas, but they do it in a much more structured environment with a little bit more researched hypotheses, but still, it was a good place for me to land. On my first day, though, I realized I was not programmed like the rest. I was an extrovert, and I was working with all these introverts. And I just thought if these guys had a little bit more exposure to some really exciting, good ideas, they would be so excited and want to high-five me all the time. And so I started planning events. And this is what happens when you invite your senior developer to come to karaoke night for a holiday party. I know, it sounds like so much fun, and it isn't, I don't think. So I also would recommend against antlers. That didn't work either. So John still doesn't really talk to me. So anyway, the important part here is that while I keep testing, I have not lost my enthusiasm for these ideas. This is me last month in Chamonix. I decided I was going to go paragliding. So I went to the top of the mountain. That's my very excited, and by that I mean smoking a cigarette and couldn't care less guide behind me. And together we were going to jump off and fly, which was super awesome. But when he asked me, do you want to experience the G-force? I was like, is that what all the tourists do? Sure, let's do it. What that is a death spiral to the ground, and eventually you start going over, and you're looking at the ground, and I was like, oh my God, if I don't die, my mother is going to kill me. Like, I am going to die. But I didn't die, I didn't get stitches, and I didn't even have a Wonder Woman blindfold. And I think the point here is that as many bad mistakes and bad ideas as I've had, they've really informed and brought me to the place I am today. So I don't really look at them with regret. I look at them as a way to meet new people and have really good stories to tell. And so if I'm going to revisit this idea of my bad ideas mapped over time, obviously, I think it's Malcolm Gladwell says you have to put 10,000 hours in to be an expert at anything. I think I'm like only 2,000 away from being like an expert in really bad ideas, which will end in obviously a couple of things, more stitches perhaps, but the eventual ability to fly. I mean, obviously. So thanks for listening to some of my bad ideas. I have so many more, as Josh mentioned. I'd be happy to share them after this and hear some of yours, so come find me and maybe we can make them happen. Thanks.